Everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thank you all so much for your interest in the William T. Grant Foundation's Youth Service Capacity Building Grants, which I will also be referring to as the YSCG program. So my name is Selina Lee, and I'm the Grants Administrator for YSCG. And I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Kim DuMont, who is our Senior Vice President of Programs. She'll be monitoring the chat and fielding questions. I'm also joined by Billy Hunter, who's our communications person here at the Foundation, as well as Unique Brathwaite from CRE Community Resource Exchange. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So the webinar is being recorded. And we will be sending out slides and the recording in the coming days. We've also built blocks specifically for Q&A, as you can see in today's agenda. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time throughout the webinar, and we will be doing our best to address them during these Q&A blocks. So for today's agenda, we'll discuss the background and introduction for the YSCG program. We'll go over what we fund, as well as some past grantees for concrete examples. We'll discuss the awards and organizational eligibility. And finally, we'll go through the application, the selection criteria, and where to apply. So in a nutshell, the Youth Service Capacity Building Grants are about supporting organizations that are tackling inequality in New York City. So for folks who are not aware, the William T. Grant Foundation's longtime mission is to support research that improves the lives of young people. However, apart from this research funding, we've also provided youth service grants since the 1970s. So the purpose of the grant is to reduce inequality in youth outcomes by strengthening the capacity of nonprofits that serve young people. There is one application cycle per year with 3 new awards granted each year. And each award provides $60,000 in support for capacity building projects over a 3-year term. So year 1 awards $30,000, year 2 $20,000, and year 3 $10,000. If awarded, please note that you do not need to reapply each year to receive these 3 payments. The $60,000 constitutes a single multi-year award. However, we do ask that grantees obtain matching funds of $10,000 in year 3. And the reason we ask this is because we hope that grantees are able to leverage this grant to secure additional funds. And please note that you do not need to know the source of this match at the time of application. And then the deadline for this year is Wednesday, September 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So here is an overview of what we fund. And I want to note that these are examples. So this is not an exhaustive list, but merely an overview of what we mean when we say capacity building. And you'll see a common thread here is that these topics are not tied directly to programs or services. So we do not fund direct assistance, cash transfers, scholarships, or anything like that. Instead, we're interested in shoring up an organization's internal capacity, their internal infrastructure, and their internal systems. So to that end, we fund projects that are related to financial management, so financial systems, accounting practices, software upgrades, board development, so recruiting new members, board retreat, board policies, human resource management, organization or program planning, so strategic planning, a staff retreat, branding exercises or a rebrand, information technology such as software upgrades, a new website or a database, leadership development such as leadership succession planning or leadership training, communications such as developing a communication strategy or marketing or design, evaluation or outcome systems such as program evaluation, or fundraising such as developing and implementing a fundraising strategy. So I know that was a lot of information. So here are some of our actual past grantees. So just to give you some examples of what we mean. So the organization Teachers and Writers Collaborative, they identified a need for more reliable funding streams that were not subject to budget cuts. So their capacity building plan allowed them to hire a full-time development director to build out a fundraising strategy. The Gardner Foundation needed planning, development, and program sustainability. So they hired a program planning consultant who was able to build them a program expansion plan. And that included staff recruitment and fundraising. And then lastly, Brooklyn Boatworks. They needed a centralized database of participants. So through this grant, they were able to develop a database system that was integrated into their website. So as you can see, the goal here is that once these grantees are able to implement their capacity building plan, it will then result in a stronger internal infrastructure and therefore stronger programs. So I think now's a good time for any questions about anything we just covered.
Thanks, Selina, and for getting us started. And I welcome people to submit their questions in the questions section, and we'll add to the ones that we received prior to the call. So there's a lot of questions, Selina, around the application process, and we'll get to that a bit but can you direct people, and perhaps Billy can put in the chat where the guide is located and when the timing of the upcoming deadline?
Sure. So on our YSCG landing page, which Billy can put in the chat right now, at the top of that page, you'll be able to find our application guidelines, which are available for download. And then the deadline is September 20th.
And another question that we have is, you described a number of different activities that people take as they undertake their work. And they wondered if there are restrictions in the budget categories, like should all the money be in personnel, or should all the money be in facilities and supplies?
No, there are no such restrictions as long as it meets a capacity building goal.
And then we have a number of questions around eligibility, the size of the organization, the size of the budget. So what I'm going to suggest is that you take us to the next session, and then we come back to these questions to because I think your comments will address most of them.
Sure, sounds good.
All right.
So first, let's get into the award. So I just want to reiterate that this is a $60,000 award over the course of 3 years. So year 1 is $30,000, year 2 is $20,000, and year 3 is $10,000. And again, we ask that grantees obtain matching funds of $10,000 in year 3. And again, there is 1 application cycle per year with 3 new awards granted each year. And in addition to the financial support, there's also a technical assistance component. And we do that through a partnership with Community Resource Exchange. So I'll bring it over to Unique to let her discuss the TA component.
Thank you so much, Selina. Thank you, Kim and Billy, and hello, everyone. My name, again, is Unique Brathwaite. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Chief External Affairs Officer at CRE, or Community Resource Exchange. For those of you who may not be familiar, CRE is a nonprofit consulting firm. We work very closely with other New York City nonprofit organizations, and we partner together around all things related to capacity building. So that's everything from leadership development, board governance, HR support, strategic planning, DEI work, all in service of making and helping nonprofits be stronger and execute on their missions in a much more strategic way. Our goal is to partner together. We believe that you all are closest to the solutions, closest to the communities, and so we want to be a true partner together in co-creating solutions. We've been a proud partner to the William T. Grant Foundation for several years in this capacity as a technical assistance provider. And as you see here on the slide, we do 2 core things in terms of this relationship. So first is we provide one-on-one customized assistance, and we also provide peer-based learning and coaching. It's important for us that we are working with the leaders in the program to be able to problem solve, troubleshoot, identify growth areas and opportunities, and do real-time customized support for different aspects of organizational development and change management that you all are facing as leaders. We also believe very strongly in a peer cohort model, so having real value in bringing leaders together in a learning and sharing space. We believe that there is so much opportunity when different kinds of leaders come together to be able to share opportunities, share problems, share resources, identify solutions, but also provide a safe space for each other to be in partnership and in community together. So through our partnership, we do these learning spaces where we are covering different topics around leadership and management, again, all in service of building the internal capacity of your teams. So you see here, I won't read it, but from this recent quotation from a participant in our program, we are excited to continue this partnership together and work closely with your leaders and your organizations in this work. Thank you all to the fantastic work that you do. And I'm happy to answer questions when they come up.
And I'm going to go off script, Selina and Unique, for a moment, because we have a question that really involves the 2 of you. And the question, Selina, based on the slide you shared with the examples of 3 grants, maybe we want to go back, is can you share a bit more about how teachers and writers use the $60,000 over a 3-year period to hire a development and fundraiser? And Unique, I don't know if you had experience of working with them directly, so either of you can jump in here. Oops.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I think I don't know the details of exactly how they did it, but I know it was mostly a staffing need that they identified, so they used the grant to meet that staffing need.
And I think, great question. Thanks, Kim. I think I'll just add that when I think questions and needs like this come up, this is where the one-on-one customized support feels really important. And so we would then partner with you all, that leader in the program, to really think about how you get from point A to point B. What's the strategy that you want to build out? What are the resources that will inform that strategy? And then how do you create the roadmap and partner together around the roadmap to get there? So in that particular example, that's how we would do it. And really all of the examples, partnering together to create a roadmap.
Thank you. And Selina, I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry for disrupting the show.
Sure. So now let's get into the nitty-gritty of eligibility, which I know everyone was very excited about. So first, we ask that all applicants be a youth-serving, community-based nonprofit located in any of the city's 5 boroughs, and faith-based organizations are eligible as long as they meet the requirements that we'll be discussing. We also ask that applicants have direct contact with youth at the point of service, and they must meet all of the organizational eligibility requirements, which we are discussing in the next slide, as well as one of 3 reducing inequality criteria, which we will also be discussing individually. So here are our organizational eligibility requirements. So applicants must meet all of these criteria. So the first is that they must serve youth aged 5 to 25, with at least 80% of youth participating in services in this age range. However, if the organization also serves adults, then at least 80% of the service recipients must be youth aged 5 to 25. Second, we ask that all applicants have their own 501c3 tax exemption or operate under a fiscal sponsor that is a registered 501c3. And I want to pause here and note that in the past, fiscally sponsored orgs were not eligible to apply, but we did waive that requirement this year. Or we waived that restriction this year. So now any org that meets requirements is eligible to apply, even if they are under a fiscal sponsor. So if you have any orgs in your networks that were interested, but were not able to apply last year or any previous years because they have a fiscal sponsor, please let them know that they are now eligible, and we would love to be connected with them. So third, the applying organization and not the fiscal sponsor must have an operating budget between $250,000 and $1 million. However, if the applying organization serves youth as well as other populations, then its operating budget must be less than $20 million, and its youth services budget must fall between this $250,000 and $1 million range. And then finally, we are asking for all applicants to be able to provide financial statements that have either been audited or reviewed by a CPA from either the applying organization itself or from its fiscal sponsor. In addition, we are also asking for a 990 from either the applying organization or the fiscal sponsor. So I know this is a lot of information. We will be having a Q&A shortly, and you can also refer to the application guide on our website. So now let's discuss each of the reducing inequality criteria individually. So again, organizations must meet one of the 3 to apply. So first is that organizations must provide youth services in one of the following 11 community districts. So that's 9 in the Bronx and 2 in Brooklyn. However, the org does not have to be based in these areas. They must simply provide services in these areas. And again, if your org does not meet this criteria, you are still eligible to apply if you meet either of the other 2 that we'll be discussing. So the second is that your org must have existing and well-defined programming that is tailored specifically to Mexican descent youth or to LGBTQ youth. So when we mean existing, we mean that you may not use this grant to start a program for either of these 2 groups. This program must already exist, and it must be tailored specifically to either of these 2 youth groups. And again, if you do not meet this criteria, you are still eligible to apply if you meet either of the other 2. And then lastly, organizations are eligible to apply if their leadership identifies as either people of color and/or LGBTQ. And again, if you do not meet this criteria, your org is still eligible to apply if you meet either of the other two. And now I'm sure we have a ton of questions, so please feel free.
Good guess about the ton of questions. Okay, so let's get started. So one question that you addressed in part, but maybe not as directly as we would like, is there a requirement around the size of the organization? And so I think you defined the requirement in terms of the size of the budget rather than the size of the organization, but I'll turn it to you to answer that first.
Yeah, so I believe that the only guidance we have is around the budget as well as the youth participants. So let me go back. So at least 80% of youth participating in services must be in this age range of 5 to 25. And if you serve adults as well, then 80% of service participants must still be youth age 5 to 25. So it's not a matter of the number of youth that are served, but just the percentage of youth that fall within this age range. And then in addition to that, there is the budget component of operating budget of between 250,000 and 1 million. So, my understanding is that it's broad so that we can try and capture as many orgs as possible who are interested in applying. So we do not specify the size of the org beyond these two requirements.
Great, thank you. And let's stay on this first bullet, Selina, if we can. Sure. There's a number of questions that are coming in about what do we mean also serving adults? Is that in the same program or is it organizationally?
So if it's organizationally, then we do ask that the organization have a youth services budget that's between 250,000 and 1 million, and then that 80% of the youth of the service recipients are youth. So if your organization is like a food bank or something that serves people of all ages, we do still ask that 80% of those recipients be youth age 5 to 25.
And then another question, we have a lot of questions that are very specific about individual organization situations. And so what we'd like to do there is, so we're not answering them on the fly on the call and perhaps get them wrong, is you're welcome to send us an email with your specific situation and context, and we are happy to review that eligibility. I understand there's quite a few of you on the call, but we are willing to do that so that we get it right and don't misdirect you. Another question that we have concerns how you define direct contact with youth. And I thought it might be useful, Selina, if you don't mind, that I just read two statements from the guide that might help people think about that.
Sure.
So there's a rich description in the guide that informs the construction of the narrative, what you write about your program. And in here, you have to describe the current youth programs, who's participating, what does it look like on a day-to-day, and how often youth come and how long they attend. So we're really wanting to understand that engagement and then who the staff are that are involved. And that's what we mean by the direct in contact versus an organization that might pass through money or serve as an intermediary on behalf of youth, but is not providing that direct services. All right. And let's see, we also have questions. What if you serve youth citywide and some of whom live or go to school in the specific neighborhoods you're talking about, but not all? How do we manage that?
Let me look through the guide. So I think we keep it broad and we say provide youth services. So we don't have a restriction of the number of youth or the percentage of youth that your organization serves that lives or is based out of these districts. So as long as some number of youth that you serve are from these areas, then I think you should be fine.
Okay, and so so the idea is that some youth need to live in the neighborhood, and we have a related question. I think it's on, if you could go forward a slide. So youth can live in any one, but they don't have to live exclusively in those neighborhoods, right? That's what you're saying on that one question. And then if you work with youth that are not of Mexican descent, can you still apply? And I think that's the next slide you had.
Yes, I think as long as there are services that are tailored specifically to Mexican descent youth or LGBTQ youth. So it does not mean that that services must only be for these young people, but as long as it's that they are also captured and that there are services targeted towards them in addition to other young people.
Is it the case, it's just that you meet one of these criteria? So let's say an organization does not serve any Mexican descent youth, but they do serve youth who live in those community districts. They would be fine to apply, correct?
Correct. So it's one of the three.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, and I think that it would be good. If we moved on to the next set of slides, I think it will address some of the questions that are coming in.
Okay, great. So now let's discuss the application itself. So we are asking for the following pieces of information. First, background information on the organization at 2 pages maximum, as well as a narrative of 6 pages maximum. And I want to note that these are based on templates that are on the website. And this is what Kim mentioned when she referred to the application guide as well. So both items must follow templates that are available on our website, and they must be in Word documents, and all of the instructions that are part of those templates. Please just access those and follow those at your earliest convenience, so we can make sure that everything is according to these templates. We're also asking for a total organization budget, a list of institutional funders, a list of the board of directors, and then the 3 items that we mentioned earlier. So the most recent audited financial statement, or the financial statements that were reviewed by a CPA for either yourself, the applying org, or the fiscal sponsor. Asking for a 990 for either yourself or your fiscal sponsor. And lastly, a 501c3 tax exempt letter from the IRS for either yourself or your fiscal sponsor. For the selection criteria, we are looking for a few things. So first, we want to see clear descriptions of the organization's mission and its current youth services, which is what Kim was mentioning earlier. We also want to see clear descriptions of the capacity building plan that you're applying for, as well as the strengths of that plan. And then we want to see a few more items about the plan itself. So it's very important that we see a compelling rationale for the plan. So we want to know how you identify this capacity building need. Example, did you survey participants? Was it brought up by staff or your board? Maybe it was something that's been on the back burner for a while and you haven't had the funds or the capacity to address it until now. So we want to know how you identified this need. And we also want to know how you think that how you think meeting this need will improve your organization as well as your services. So overall, competitive proposals will make the case that addressing this need will result in a strengthened organization and more effective services. And then where to apply? So I've mentioned our website a few times, but if you go to the landing page for the youth service capacity building grants, then you'll be able to download the application guide. But the Spanish guide is also forthcoming. You'll be able to download submission instructions as well as the narrative templates I just mentioned. And then finally, you'll need to create an account with our grants portal, which is known as Smart Simple, in order to submit. So the submission instructions will have everything you need to know there in order to access the portal. But we ask you to please make sure to access this portal sooner rather than later so that you have time to familiarize yourself with the portal and documentation. And I want to stress that only applications that are submitted through the portal will be considered, so please give yourself plenty of time. And then I think we'll have time for some more questions.
Great. Thanks, Selina. I think it's useful to continue going back to the eligibility slides. That is where most of the questions are coming about.
Sure.
And so there are 2 sets of criteria where people are asking questions. One are about the organizational, the size of the organization and the budgets. And this question about being predominantly youth-oriented in the services. So that's one set. And then the second set of questions and where really most of them sit are on around the reducing inequality focus. So if you could flip to that one. So on here, just to stress again that you have to meet one of the 3 criteria. And so if you're an organization, I'm going to read, is primarily serves the children of poor Caucasian immigrants, are we not eligible, or are we eligible to apply? And so if this is the case and you have a leader who is a person of color or LGBTQ individual, you would be able to apply. Or if this is the case and you're serving primarily children of poor Caucasian immigrants and you provide services, and I'm going to get the language here, if you provide services in any of these communities that Selina has highlighted, you would be eligible to apply. Yes. So I think people are thinking you have to meet all 3, and you don't. You can meet one of the 3. Then there's a question. Can you go back to the what we want to see in the application slide? Okay, I'm not sure I have the question on this one. People just wanted to see the slide again. Do you want to just run through it?
Sure. So we're looking for clear descriptions of your organization's mission and its current youth services. So we just want to get very grounded in what you all are doing first before you dive into the capacity building plan. And then once you've set the stage for your mission and your services, then we're looking for some information about the capacity building plan that you all have landed on and the strengths of that plan. So part of that section will be a compelling rationale for the plan itself. So we want to know how you identified this need, either through a formal or informal assessment, just through conversations with staff, conversations with participants, anything about how you identified this need, and then how you think that meeting this need will improve your organization and its services. So does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. And so we'll get questions if people still have questions around there. They're asking Billy, can we post an email that we should use for the question? Selina, is it okay if he puts your email in the chat? There we go. Thank you for moving that forward. Another question is, again, there's a lot of specific situations that people are asking about. So, but a question we're getting really is about the 80% of youth participating in the services. Is that specific to one program or the organization?
So I would say organization.
Yeah, that's correct. That's how it's intended. And then a similar question on the same slide. Does the operating budget need to be under $1 million for the whole organization or for the project?
So that would be the whole organization's operating budget.
Easier one for you, Selina, is when would people be notified about their being considered or they learn of their funding decision?
Sure. So we have it scheduled out so far that decisions will be made in March, but we are doing our best to move that up to around April, or sorry, February, March.
I'm going to take some of the specific situations since they're in here. And if you go to the next slide, again, it's on the reducing inequality eligibility. What if you serve children ages 3 to 11 in Harlem and have a Black executive director? Would you be eligible?
Yes, so you are eligible.
Because you meet the final of the third one that you list here, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Is there a restriction on the level of leaders? Can they be managers? It's a great question, and we might have to take that one online. I think when the intent of this was to be sure that the organizational leaders, that resources were going to organizations that were led by leaders who had historically been marginalized or excluded. So that's where the initial intent came. So we'll have to think about that specific situation. Okay, yes, we will send out slides. We will post them on our website, and then you can see. How many organizations are estimated to apply?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's usually a pretty small number, maybe around a dozen or so. We are obviously hoping for a larger pool this year since we removed the restriction about fiscal sponsorships. And we're also in the process of finalizing an application guide in Spanish to reach an even larger audience. But historically, it's been a pretty small pool.
Great. And how many grants will be funded?
So 3 grants will be funded.
See, there's a lot of questions coming in. I think we have actually addressed most of the questions. There's a thank you for waiving the fiscal sponsor requirement, just to pass that along. And there's a question around what expenses, when people are developing their budgets, are permissible and which are not. Do you want to talk a little bit about that or not?
I think that would be something that I would want to check back on. So I would, if you would like to email me directly with that, then we could discuss that in more detail.
Okay. And so what I would say is that there is a budget template that does help in guiding how you construct that. So there's certainly lines for staff, there are lines for indirect expenses, subcontracts, all those kind of things. And so there'll be instructions in the guide as well as on the website and other places. Let's see. And I'm going through the questions. How many Are there any restrictions in applying if you've received this grant before?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim. Was it 1 year between being awarded and then being able to apply again?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So what % of applicants get funded? How many applications did you say come in, Selina?
About a dozen.
So about a quarter of the applicants are funded. So I think that, and Billy came running in and being helpful to help us clarify that you provide youth services in one of these areas. Your organization does not need to physically sit in one of those areas. And we previously, so that's what I would say, that you provide services. Okay, any other questions? Unique, I'm wondering if you could come on for a moment and if there's an example of some work that you've been doing, of a success story, the kind of challenges that organizations share in their work that you focus on, it'd be great to hear about.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kim. You know, I think we see, and particularly over the last couple of years coming through and beyond the pandemic, you know, we're seeing a lot of organizations who are navigating change at different levels, right? Whether it's internally with their teams or, you know, redefining their scope and their reach and how they want to execute their mission, and or navigating the external environment, which continues to be unpredictable, particularly around funding. And so I think, you know, we're seeing leaders and teams, including boards, coming to us with a lot of questions around planning both in the short and the long term. And that's been something CRE, our sort of sweet spot is around strategic planning and around all aspects of planning. But really, I think, most recently, how do we make sure that organizations are equipped to continue thriving, navigating a landscape that is just unpredictable? And how do you do that with the values of equity, inclusion, and diversity? So I think overall, that's what we're seeing. And I use the word partnership a lot before because it is really true that we don't, as an organization, kind of helicopter in and say, you know what, we've been doing this for a long time and we know what solutions are right for you, but rather we're coming in to really understand where you are at this moment in time, ask a set of really powerful questions and demonstrate our appreciative inquiry around where a particular organization is, and then start visioning around, okay, what are the next steps and how do we get there and how do we do it in a way that involves your teams, your stakeholders, again, through the values and the vision that organizations espouse, particularly over the last couple of years and navigating the pandemic, so that folks are coming away with, again, a real roadmap that can be and will be implemented. So again, whether that's thinking about board governance, whether that's creating a theory of change because an organization is, thinking about what's our impact and how do we want to both sustain that and grow that. Or coaching leadership development for team members. So I think I would speak broadly, Kim, about sort of like what we're seeing and the impact that we're having. But I think we see people really leading with a set of tangible resources, skills, knowledge, and then connections, right? Connections, because those peer groups are so important. So not feeling isolated in the process as you are as leaders and teams navigating different kinds of challenges. So through our experience and partnership together, we're kind of curating all of those things, facilitating resources, knowledge, and exchange in our partnership together. But I think most importantly, with something really tangible that you can take away and bring back to your organization. And by extension, the communities and the people that you're working with, the young people that you're working with.
Thanks, Unique. And one thing I'd like to underscore there that you really highlighted in your example is that this is a grant to an organization to extend their capacity to shore it up, as Selina said early in the presentation. And we have another program called the Youth Service Improvement Grants that really gets at the programmatic level. And so we keep these two distinct, and the funding for that usually the call for proposal comes out early next year, and we fund 6 of those awards. So this is about the organization. I think that will help. And Selina, we have a question, and Unique, you're welcome to answer as well, about the kinds of organizations that we support and activities. So are we interested in ones that provide after-school programming, that provide arts programming? Is there one or an array of organization and program types that we support?
It's definitely an array. So there's no saying like if you do XYZ, you have an advantage, because that's what we prefer. That's not true at all. It's really an array.
And I would just add, oh, I'm sorry. I would just add, one of the things that we talk about both internally, but also is how we get to know an organization that we're partnering with is around readiness, right? It's one thing to say, capacity building, and this is important, but really being able to be in a position across your organization to make the necessary pivots or take the pauses, do the reflection, do the work together, with your teams, with your board, with your community members as needed to be able to really build the capacity, which takes time, right? And so I think I would just offer that in addition to what Selina said around an array of organizations, I think really thinking about the readiness and the place that you all are in to be able to embark on this kind of journey, which is going to have, results in sort of different ways along the path. That's what I would offer.
Great. And thank you. And Selina, because people have come in at different parts of the webinar, going to ask a few questions we captured at the beginning. One is just the range of the award amount. If you could repeat the award amount, when the people would likely be notified, and when the dates for the award are, kind of when do people typically start, how long does it run?
Sure. So it's a $60,000 award over the course of 3 years. So year one is $30,000, year two is $20,000, year three is $10,000. And awards are usually made in March, but we're doing our best to bring that up to February. So we are hoping for, February or March award date or notification date in 2024. And what was the last question?
Is the terms of, like, they run for 3 years. When do people typically start?
Usually over the summer, I would say. So if they are awarded in March or February, then it'll probably start in like April, May, June-ish, depending on if they get all their paperwork to us.
Right. And then there's a question, and I know this a little bit outside what you do, Selina, but people are picking up that I mentioned that there's a youth programming grant of some kind, and they wanted to know if there's more information about this online.
Yeah, so on our website, there's a youth service capacity building landing page, and then right next to that is a youth service improvement grant landing page, so you can check those both out at the same time.
And the eligibility for that program is a little different. They're allowed for a higher budget range, so you're welcome to see that. And then there's a question which this poll speaks to, which we're getting, is will people be able to meet with you to discuss their kind of particular situation? And so we've invited you to say, would it be helpful to have an informal call so that you can get some of these detailed questions? And of course, we've offered, Selina has generously offered for you to send things to her inbox so that she can review them and meet with other people on our team to make sure we give you a good answer. All right. So I think we have covered most of the questions. Others get more granular and specific to the situations. As Selina, is there anything you'd like to say to kind of wrap us up?
No, other than I'm looking forward to reading your applications.
Unique, anything you'd like to add? Oops.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. No, similarly, I also am looking forward to being in partnership with members of our team to get to know your organizations and partner together. But again, just thank you for your incredible work and looking forward to this next journey together.
Great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay tuned. I think we will be having some informal drop-ins or office hours that we'll figure out what the best structure is for you to get your more specific questions answered. And we look forward to reading your applications, as Selina said. Thank you.
Thank you.